כן? שלום לכולם. וואו, אנחנו מאוד 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 מתרגשים. אנחנו נמצאים כאן במשרדים של קרן רמון בתל אביב, עם המון אנשים מהצוות הטכני ואנשי תוכן, גם ממייקרוסופט וגם מקרן רמון, וטל רמון נמצא כאן, ואבי בלסברגר, המנהל של סוכנות החלל הישראלית, נמצאים כאן, ואנחנו מאוד 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 מתרגשים. ג'סיקה מאיר גם כן מאוד 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 מתרגשת. כשדיברנו איתה לפני כמה ימים, היא סיפרה שמאז שהיא חזרה היא נתנה כמה ראיונות, אבל זאת תהיה הפעם הראשונה שהיא מדברת עם קהלים פתוחים, עם תלמידים ועם מורים ועם בשידור חי ככה, והיא מאוד שמחה שהפעם הראשונה תהיה בעצם עם ילדים ישראלים, וזה כיף ומרגש. אז קצת לוחות זמנים והנחיות על כל מה שקורה בשידור הזה. אז אנחנו התחלנו שידור לפני עכשיו, ואנחנו עכשיו בחלק שבו אנחנו נותנים לך איזושהי הקדמה, הנחיות וברכות. באזור שעה 3:25 תהיה תחילת ההרצאה, וזה השלב שבו כל הסשן הזה הולך לעבור לשפה האנגלית. שתי הערות. ההערה הראשונה, ובסוף הסשן, אחרי ההרצאה של ג'סיקה, היא גם תענה על שאלות מהקהל. שתי הערות. ההערה הראשונה זה שניתן לצפות בהרצאה בתרגום סימולטני לעברית בערוץ היוטיוב של קרן רמון. אז אם יש לכם ילדים בבית שפחות מבינים אנגלית או אנשים שמתקשים, תאספו את הילדים בני ה-4, 5, 6 או צפונה מזה אל הטלוויזיה או למכשיר סלולרי שלכם, תחפשו ביוטיוב את הערוץ של קרן רמון, יש שם מישהי בשם קלי, מקסימה, שתתרגם סימולטנית ותוכלו להבין את כל מה שג'סיקה מדברת עליו, כולל פרשנות לכל הסרטונים. הדבר השני הוא איך שואלים את ג'סיקה שאלות, והתשובה לכך היא מאוד פשוטה. השידור הזה משודר בעמוד הראשי של מייקרוסופט ושל סוכנות החלל הישראלית ושל החברים שלנו מתעשייה אווירית, ובאפליקציית N12 כמובן, וגם בעמוד פייסבוק של קרן רמון. פשוט תרשמו את השאלה בצ'אט, לצד זה שאתם רושמים את השאלה, תרשמו מי שואל, בין כמה ומאיזה יישוב בארץ, ובסיום השידור אנחנו בקרן רמון נבחר 6 שאלות ונציג אותן לג'סיקה. חשוב לי מאוד לומר המון תודה לכל מי שאפשר את האירוע הזה קורה, לצוות בקרן רמון, לשותפים שלנו ב-N12 שמשדרים את הסשן הזה ואת ההרצאה הזאת בלייב, לשותפים שלנו בסוכנות החלל הישראלית במשרד המדע, למשרד החינוך ולחברת מייקרוסופט, שבאיזשהו שלב בשבוע שעבר כשאנחנו עובדים מול נאסא הבנו שדרישות האבטחה מאוד מאוד כבדות עלינו, שזה הפקה לוגיסטית מאוד כבדה, והשותפים שלנו במייקרוסופט פשוט נרתמו למשימה, ולקחו את זה על עצמם וסייעו לנו בהתנדבות להעביר את השידור הזה לכל עם ישראל. מוסרים לי שאנחנו כרגע נמצאים בכל הרשתות סדר גודל של 50,000 איש, שזה מאוד 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 משמח. קצת עלינו, אנחנו קרן רמון, אנחנו עמותה ללא כמובן מטרת רווח, הוקמנו כדי לעשות את מה שאילן רמון היה עושה אם הוא היה חוזר מהחלל. אילן רצה כשהוא חזר מהחלל להמשיך לעבוד עם ילדים ובני נוער, ובעצם רונה הנציחה אותו והקימה את העמותה אחרי הטרגדיה השנייה של המשפחה, כשסרן אסף רמון נהרג בתאונת אימונים. אנחנו פעילים בכל הארץ, מפעילים תוכניות חינוכיות מדן ועד אילת, בסדר גודל של 200 מסגרות חינוכיות, והאירוע הזה הוא אירוע במסגרת פעילות רגילה של הקרן. למעשה זה חלק מאירועי סוף שנת הלימודים של קרן רמון, זה הסיום של תוכנית שלנו שקוראים לה רמון Spacewalks, תוכנית של לימודי מדעים וחלל לחטיבות ביניים. במסגרת התוכנית הזאת בני נוער מתחרים על שיגור של ניסוי לתחנת החלל הבינלאומית. כאן אתם רואים אסטרונאוט בשם דון תומאס שנפגש עם ילדים. התוכנית הזאת בשיתוף פעולה גם עם נאסא, גם עם סוכנות החלל הישראלית, עם משרד החינוך, בתי ספר, רשויות מקומיות, והיא מדהימה. בתקופת הקורונה אנחנו המשכנו פעילות לגמרי. כל התוכניות שלנו עברו בעצם ללימוד מרחוק, באיזשהו מודל מיוחד וחדשני של למידה היברידית, שהוא לא תלוי במיקום, אם אתה בכיתה או בבית, או באם הלימוד הוא קבוצתי, כיתתי או אינדיבידואלי. לצורך העניין לאירוע סיום הזה, אז מה שאתם רואים למעלה מצד ימין, זה פתחנו אתר אינטרנט, הילדים בכיתות או מחוץ לכיתות נכנסו אליו, לחצו על כל מיני לחצנים ושר המדע וטל רמון ואסטרונאוטים נתנו להם כל מיני משימות מדעיות, והם למעשה ביצעו את הלימוד הזה, וזה לא משנה אם הייתה קורונה והם לא יכלו להגיע לבית ספר, או שהם הגיעו לבית ספר. אנחנו המשכנו כרגיל, ובראש ובראשונה אני אברך גם את התלמידים של Spacewalks, את אותם 1,500 תלמידים שמסיימים הלכה למעשה את התוכנית שלהם, הם השתתפו בתחרות הזאת לפני כמה ימים, והזוכים באירוע הסיום השנה של Spacewalks, אני יודע שאתם רואים אותנו, אז במקום הראשון עמית סדרות דתי, במקום השני אולפנית ישורון, ובמקום השלישי אורט רוגוזים מגדל העמק. ברכות. ושוב פעם נגיד תודה לשותפים שלנו במייקרוסופט שעשו את העבודה הזאת, וגם הם עושים פעילות חינוכית, ואני כן אומר, כי אני יודע שיש לפחות 1,000 אנשי חינוך שנמצאים כאן, ההרשמה לתוכניות שלנו לשנת הלימודים הבאה פתוחה, תיכנסו לאתר של הקרן, רק אם אתם מוסד חינוכי, לא הורים או ילדים, פשוט תקליטו ואנחנו נחזור אליכם. בואו נעבור לשלב של הברכות. אז נמצא איתנו כאן איש מאוד מיוחד שלמעשה מנווט ומוביל את כל תעשיית החלל הישראלית, אבי בלסגיברגר, מנכ"ל סוכנות החלל. אבי, אתה יכול לדבר?
שלום לכולם, לבוגרים הטריים של תוכנית Spacewalks ולקהל הרחב שנמצא איתנו היום. Since we have an honorable guest today with us, with your permission, I will mix between English and Hebrew. היה לנו שבוע מאוד מרגש לפעילות החלל עם צעירים בארץ. ראשית, היה כאן הגמר של תחרות Spacewalks של קרן רמון, הזוכים, שרן כבר ציין אותם, ישלחו ניסויים לתחנת החלל הבינלאומית. במקביל, הסתיימה גם השבוע אולימפיאדת רמון לחלל, התחרות הארצית של סוכנות החלל, יחד עם קרן רמון במשרד החינוך מקיימת, עבור חטיבות הביניים, אשר השתתפו בה יותר מ-260 כיתות בתי ספר בארץ, ובסופו הם תכננו תחנת חלל עתידנית. כמובן שאי אפשר שלא להזכיר את התקופה המיוחדת והמשונה בה אנחנו נמצאים היום, תקופת הקורונה שהציבה לנו אתגרים חדשים, וגם לכם התלמידים, המורים, המדריכים, ובסופה הצלחנו לעשות את התחרויות, את הלימודים בצורה מאתגרת, ומי שצלח את זה יוכל לצלוח בעתיד גם כל אתגר קשה כלשהו. והייתי רוצה גם לברך את ג'סיקה. ג'סיקה, we are honored to have you here with us today, sharing with us some of your knowledge and experience. We want to use this opportunity to personally thank you. Every year, astronauts from all over the world come to join us in the Israeli Space Week, inspiring the young generation by sharing their experience with them. We would like to thank them all. I'm taking this opportunity to invite you personally to the next Israeli Space Week, which will take place at the end of January 2021. The Space Week was initiated on this date to commemorate the Columbia STS-107 crew with members, and Ilan Ramon, who was among them. We hope to see you here in Israel end of January. ולסיום, אני רוצה להודות לאנשי קרן רמון על ארגון יום זה, על ההרצאה המעניינת, שאני בטוח שתהיה מאוד מעניינת, ומעבר לכך, על הפעילות שלהם בכל השנה לקידום החינוך והחלל בישראל, ועכשיו הם גם רוצים לקדם את התעשייה בישראל. תודה רבה לרן לבנה, מנכ"ל הקרן, וכל צוות העובדים והעובדות. אני בטוח שיהיה לכם אחר הצהריים מענה.
תודה רבה לאבי. רגע לפני שאנחנו ממשיכים, אני אומר כמה דברים על ג'סיקה. ג'סיקה מאיר, בת 41, היא מאוד אוהבת חיות. אני יודע שיש די הרבה ילדים שיש להם חיות מחמד, אז היא מאוד אוהבת את העבודת דוקטורט שלה, היא עשתה על פינגווינים, ואחר כך עשתה מחקר על ציפורים. ואבא שלה ישראלי, שאפילו נלחם כאן במלחמת השחרור. היא לקחה איתה לחלל חפצים שציינו את אילן ואת רונה, אני יודע שהיא הולכת לציין את הדבר הזה. עוד מישהו שנותן חסות לאירוע הזה, זה שר המדע, חבר הכנסת יזהר שי, שהקליט איזושהי הודעה של דקה, ואנחנו נקרין ואז נתחיל את האירוע.
Thank you, Jessica, so much for delivering your talk here today in front of Israeli youngsters. You know, Ilan Ramon's mission in space was not only to achieve this great accomplishment of being the first ever Israeli astronaut. His vision was to introduce the notion of space and space innovation within Israeli youngsters, so to inspire them to aspire for the best, to break through any kind of glass ceiling, and to promote science, research, and innovation within youngsters around this country. Your talk here today is, because of this, a continuation of Ilan's mission to promote and to introduce entrepreneurship, innovation, and the love for space here in Israel, and especially for Israeli youngsters. I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to thank the NASA and Ilan Ramon Foundation for co-hosting this great event. I'm sure it was an inspiration for everybody who had the privilege of participating. Thank you so much, and shalom.
טוב, תודה רבה לשר יזהר שי. אני מאוד 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 שמח להזמין לכאן ולדבר את טל רמון שיציג את ג'סיקה. בבקשה, טל.
שלום לרן, שלום לכל הצופים, שלום לכולם. אני רוצה להגיד קודם כל תודה, איזה כיף שהדבר הזה קורה, בזכות הקרן, בזכות כל מי שכאן, זה מדהים שאנחנו יכולים בעצם לשמוע את ג'סיקה, בחורה שעברה כל כך הרבה דברים, הייתה בתחנת החלל, היה לה הרבה זמן ככה, בחלל, והיא חזרה ממש לאחרונה, ממש לתוך הקורונה והקוורנטין. הבידוד שלה בעצם המשיך, ואיזה כיף שאנחנו יכולים לארח אותה פה ולשמוע את החוויה האישית שלה. אני יודע שזה משהו שאבא שלי היה ממש, היה חשוב לו להמשיך את החינוך בחלל פה בארץ, וזה משהו שהוא דיבר עליו. אז אני שמח מאוד שאנחנו ממשיכים לארח פה אסטרונאוטים מדי שנה, ועכשיו אנחנו בתקופת קורונה נעשה זום, בעצם נעשה לייב עם ג'סיקה מאיר. ג'סיקה מאיר, are you with us?
Shalom, good morning. I am here with you.
Hey, darling. It's good to see you, good to hear you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It is early in the morning here for us, but I'm very happy that I could join everybody in Israel today. It means very much to me to be here.
Amazing. And you came back straight to quarantine?
Yeah, I've been back for just over 6 weeks now. So I did have the first week where we actually stayed in quarantine the entire time at the NASA Johnson Space Center. Normally astronauts only stay there for a night or so, but given the situation on the Earth that we came back to, they wanted to make sure that we stayed safe. So we were there for a whole week.
Wow, it's so amazing to hear you and hear your experiences. I'm so glad that we're here with so many viewers, and you get to tell the story, this wonderful story that you have, and your amazing connection to my family. And I want to say thank you so much for all that you have done, and it's really it really makes me feel proud. And I'm so glad that you did these things and you made this connection strong and stronger for us and into the future. So I just want to let you kind of take the stage and let you talk about your experiences and enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and it really does mean so much to me as well, and to all of my family in Israel. I think that we are connected in so many ways, and so I'll talk a little bit about that today, and hopefully share a little bit about my adventure, since I was fortunate enough to be on the International Space Station for almost 7 months. So hopefully I can share that with you. I'm going to just bring up my PowerPoint here, hopefully. Okay, I think that people can hopefully see the slides now. And
it's perfect.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning and shalom once again. I just wanted to start out and set the scene a little bit by talking about why we're all here and the connections that we have today, because I think that's an important part about all of this that goes into sharing my adventure. And of course, one of the things that we have in common, everyone I think paying attention today, and of course especially Tal after that introduction, were the Columbia crew, the STS-107 crew that flew on the Space Shuttle Columbia. I actually was here not as an astronaut back then, but I was working as a scientist, and I supported the human life science experiments back then at NASA, all of the physiological experiments that we as astronauts are subjects for, and those kinds of investigations. So I was one of the people that was helping facilitate all those experiments with the crew members. So our office, my department here at NASA, we were the ones that were most heavily involved with all of the experiments for this mission, because I'm not sure if everybody was aware, but STS-107 was a particularly life science intensive mission. There were very many life science experiments and investigations that were being conducted here, and so we were regularly in contact and working with the crew in my group. So this was something, and the tragedy that followed with the Columbia was something that I was very closely connected to in many ways, being here at NASA and having worked in that position. And it was something that, you know, I know that it was a tragedy that we all felt, and something that we will never fully recover from, of course. But it's very important to talk about and remember. First of all, this crew, these 7 individuals, including the first Israeli astronaut, Ilan Ramon, they accomplished an incredibly successful mission before the disaster happened. They did so many experiments, spent so much time doing so much incredible work that we are still benefiting from back here on Earth. And the fact that they really did give the ultimate sacrifice, as we sometimes see in this profession and other professions like aviation, that really helped us get where we are today. Without these sacrifices and without these actions that other astronauts and other people that we work with have given, we really wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be making the progress that we have today. And I think that's very, very important to remember. And we remember all of these astronauts, all of our fallen heroes from all of the other tragedies that unfortunately our program has faced as well. But that is what keeps us moving forward. That keeps all of us safer as we move forward, and it allows us to continue to explore. So without these people, without these generations of astronauts all around the world that did, some of them, give the ultimate sacrifice, we really wouldn't be where we are today, and that's very important to remember. And this crew, let's see, crew, as I was just mentioning, here's a picture of them during the mission, and they were an incredibly positive, happy, and successful crew, and I think that's the way that I know that all of them would want you to be thinking about them today, about the extraordinary work that they accomplished in space, about their dreams coming true, about, you know, all of Israel's dreams coming true when Ilan Ramon launched and made it to space. And so I think that's a very important part of all of this to remember. I, of course, have a connection with Israel as well. I think that most of you know that, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. I know that many astronauts have had the privilege of coming to Israel and sharing their experiences with you, but it's an even stronger connection for me, and that's because my family is also from Israel. My dad grew up in what was formerly Palestine and then became Israel. He was actually one of the very first volunteers for the very first Israeli army in 1948, and he drove an ambulance in that war, and he grew up there, and all of my relatives and family on that side, almost all of them are still in Israel. So it is a place that I love to come back and visit and see everybody, and I don't get there often enough. I was there last in 2016, and hopefully I will be able to come back in January. Thank you so much for that incredible invitation, and I hope to be able to come and share more with you in January. But I wanted to share a few images of what it was like for me to have that privilege of being on the International Space Station, looking down on our Earth, and show you a few more of these special connections that we have in common. And then I'll get in and I'll show you some of the mission highlights from a video that our team put together about my mission in space. One of the things that I brought with me was this coin to once again commemorate Ilan and his crew. And so you can see a picture of that here floating in the International Space Station cupola. And I can tell you that this view is one of the most extraordinary pieces of the entire mission. When you are here looking down on the planet, it really does transform you as a person for a few different ways. I think one of the big ones is how connected you feel, how you realize that this Earth that we are all living on is a very beautiful, but of course also a very fragile one. You can see the thin, tenuous band of the atmosphere in the distance, and you realize that as humans, all of us humans, we really need to do our best to take care of this planet because it is a very precious, fragile one, and we only have one of them. I think that a lot of astronauts, once they see that with their own eyes, it helps them reinforce that ideal even further and how important that is. Because when you are off the planet and you are surrounded by the blackness of space on all sides, when you realize even more so how unique our planet is. And hopefully, in commemorating Ilan Ramon with this coin and the other items that we brought on, that spirit of his view of him looking back on the Earth, and I'm sure he was filled with that same kind of feeling and understanding looking down. And of course, he was a part of a crew. There were 6 other individuals that were part of that mission with him. The second thing that you feel when you're looking back on the Earth and you start to think about and philosophize and understand even more is really how insignificant we are as humans, as a whole planet Earth in the scope of the solar system and on the bigger part of the universe. And to remember that that's actually an important perspective, not to say that the things that we do don't matter. But on Earth, sometimes I'm sure it's easy for all of you to get caught up in maybe a small detail of something that's really not that important in the long term. As humans, it's very easy for us to do that and to dwell on those things and sometimes forget the bigger picture. But it's important to remember that we are all part of something much bigger than us. And when you're looking down on the planet and you're seeing it down there in its entirety, this fragile blue ball with everything you've ever known, every place, every experience, every opportunity, all of the people that you know are down there together, and you are separate from that. It really helps you understand these things. And I often say I wish that everybody, every human on the planet would have the opportunity to see the Earth the way that the few of us that are astronauts get to see it, because I do really think that it would improve all of our relations all around the world and people's perspective and how they look at things. Now, the other reason why we're all here today is, of course, because of Rona Ramon, Ilan's wife, and the foundation that she created, which is allowing all of us to get together today and to share our experiences and to do these things and to give on to the future generations. After the death of her son, Asaf, Rona created the Ramon Foundation, and all of you there know this story even much better than I do. And of course, Tala is more closely tied to it than anybody else. But this is another thing that I brought with me on my mission, and this is a painting that Rona did of a bird, of a phoenix rising from the ashes. And as I'm told, that is something that was important to her. I think it really is an image that represents what she was trying to do and what is such a strong and indomitable part of the human spirit for somebody to have faced so much tragedy and sadness in her life, but to be able to realize that there again is something bigger, there's a bigger purpose, and there is something else that we can do as individuals to give back and to help carry that spirit forward. That spirit that Alan had as an astronaut and that Asaf had as a military pilot. The spirit to live on and to encourage and inspire and to give on to the generations before. I really love this painting, and I felt so honored to be able to carry this to space with me and to take a picture of this. And so all of these items I will be giving them back, and so that they can be shared with all of you, with all of Israel, and with all of the community at large to enjoy them even further. Again, as I mentioned, I do have the Israeli heritage that you share as well, and so I wanted to really represent that with a flag. I brought flags. Both of my parents are actually from different countries. My mother's from Sweden and my father from Israel, as we mentioned. My father's family, actually, my dad was born in Baghdad back in 1925 and left Baghdad in the early 30s going to what was then Palestine. And so a long history there of my father's side of the family, as I already mentioned. I brought this flag, and this flag actually was special to me too. It was the first flag that I ever owned. I bought this flag as well as a Swedish flag when I was back studying in university because I felt like they were such a strong part of my history, my personal history, and my connection to people on the Earth. And these are the same flags that I brought to space, or these same flags that I bought back when I was a university student. And I've had them with me all that time, and I made sure to include those. This is a picture of the flag in the Japanese experiment module on the space station, and you'll see a little bit more the different parts of the space station when we proceed with the tour. So in showing you some of these images and trying to share a little bit of what it's like to look down on our planet and to understand the bigger picture of what this is, I wanted to reiterate one of the messages that I was alluding to earlier. And I think that one of those things that's so important for all of us to remember is to expand our view. As I was mentioning earlier, it's sometimes so easy to get caught up in the small, minor details in life, maybe a fight that you had with your friend or your parent, or something as silly as planning the outfit that you're going to wear to a party or to school the next day. And these things in the moment can seem so important, and you can easily get so wrapped up in small things like this in life. But it's very important to remember to take that step back, to broaden your perspective of the things that are important, and in terms of our place in the world as well. And in thinking about that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what you describe as home. All of us all around the planet have very different ideas about what home is, because we all grow up in very different circumstances, geographically and also just in the places in life that we find ourselves as humans. This is a picture, maybe you've seen it before. I took it early on in my mission. It was one of the first pictures that I took of Israel. And I put a lot of importance in taking a lot of photographs when I was on the space station, because for me, I wanted to be able to capture that imagery, to remember it not only for myself, but to be able to share it with everybody back on the planet. All of us astronauts realize how incredibly lucky and fortunate we are to be some of the few people that have the experiences that we do. And it is a huge part of my personal mission to share this with as many people as possible, because I certainly would not have gotten here if it were just up to me. There were so many people in my life that made this journey possible, and starting all the way back historically with my family right there back in Israel. So if you start thinking about your home, you can maybe see where you are in this photograph, what home means to you. Home first means wherever you're living, your local neighborhood, and at a slightly larger scale, your home country of Israel. But if you take one step further and you think about home from a slightly different perspective, and to try to help with that, Ron, I'm going to try to play this here and we'll see how it plays. Otherwise, this is the daytime time lapse, and we can let you take over if it doesn't work, but we'll see how this works from here. This is a time-lapse photograph that I took, and so you can see in the top part of the view, you can see the space station. I'm looking out of the bottom window, so that's why I can only see the bottom part here. And we're starting out over Africa, and this is one of my favorite places to fly over. Look at all the mix of all of the colors and the incredible array of colors and textures in the sand. The river there on your right, that is the Nile. You can see the Nile and coming and emptying out into Cairo, and there it is again. There's your home and another view of your home. Taking one step back from that first picture and putting it more into a global perspective where we can start seeing all of these other countries and continents that are so close to Israel and so close to all of the other land masses. We're ending up here. Here's the Caspian Sea. You can see the wonderful array of colors there in the ocean currents and the sea currents. And I loved seeing this amazing array of color and diversity that we have the privilege of seeing from the space station. So think about that. Take that one step back when you're thinking not only of your home of Israel, but you're also thinking of your home really on the planet Earth. And I'm going to share one more view. This is going to be the same view, a similar path geographically, but now this is at night. So I set up that time-lapse camera again in the cupola, and here I am passing over Africa, and it's almost all black because there's not much population in those areas. And now you see the Nile, and you can see that all of the population is really right here. I'm going to just pause that for a second and go back a little bit here. This is one of the most extraordinary views, I thought, on the International Space Station. You're coming up over here, and you see this. Most of Africa is really black, and you see a few lights coming here and there. And then you come up here to the Nile, and look at that. All of those lights are outlining all along the river because, of course, as humans, we need water to survive, and often our civilizations are built along these waterways. So you can see that plain, just completely clearly, looking down at the planet, you can see how our civilization grew and emerged all along the river there. And then the bright lights up above, that's the city of Cairo. And then I think if you look just up and to the right of Cairo, there's another view that you recognize really well. So we'll start this one over again. So here you are. This is actually not water, that's Africa. You can see a few lights there burning to the left and right. And now here it comes again. Here's the Nile. There's Cairo. And of course, now you can see Israel coming into view. You can see the brighter lights around Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and then proceeding further north from there. So I think you can see, even just looking at these pictures in this time lapse, how extraordinary and how lucky we are to have these views. And it really does change the way that you look at the world. So in thinking about everything in your life, try to remember that. Try to remember the bigger perspective of taking that step back. Here I can see North America, so I can see the places that I've called home in my life. But once again, really, we are all on one planet Earth. This is the home for me, for you, for everybody watching today, because we are really all in this together, all here on our one planet. If you take one step back even further from that, this is a picture taken during the Apollo missions and taken during Apollo 8. And this is the iconic Earthrise photo. You've probably seen this before. And the reason why this picture was so important is because it was the first time that human eyes had looked back on our planet and captured a photograph of that to share with everybody. And I think, for all of you students watching today, it's not a surprise to see how the Earth looks from the outside, because the whole time you've been alive, we've had that kind of imagery taken from photographs, taken from satellites and that kind of thing. But you have to remember that during this era, which really wasn't that long ago, humans had never seen this before. We didn't actually know what it was going to look like from our own eyes. And so this image was really pivotal in creating and shaping the environmental movement, how I spoke about earlier, and how looking back at this precious blue gem, understanding that it's so special and that we need to protect it, that helped reinforce that idea and really sparked that movement when we finally saw the Earth from the outside. So if you think about it again, there it is. There's our home, getting further and further away and helping us realize, I think, that it is a place that we all share. Usually when I show this picture in a talk, I love to ask people where they think this photograph was taken. So think for a minute if you can try to understand where this photograph might have been taken from. And you can see where it says Earth. and there's a tiny little dot there. It looks just like a little star in the sky, a light star that you might see from here. That is actually the planet Earth, and this picture was taken from the surface of Mars. Not by humans, of course, since we haven't been there quite yet with humans, but this was taken by the Curiosity rover in looking back at Earth. So you can understand, if you continue to shift your perspective and to think a little bit more broadly with a big picture, how your perspective can really change. That little speck is Earth. That is home for all of us. And I think then it maybe echoes and resonates even further how truly we are all in this together back on planet Earth, on our home. And so this is where I wanted to wrap up this part of the talk, because I know that you're all very anxious to see some more pictures of action in space, and I'm very excited to share those experiences that I had on the space station with you. We're going to do that in video because, hey, video is probably even better to watch and understand how things feel than the pictures are. But I wanted to leave you with that thought, to remember that we are truly all in this together as human beings, as one species of humans. And that's something that has become even increasingly more important recently with all of the world events that are happening. This was something that I thought a lot about in the beginning of my mission, as I mentioned, from that environmental perspective, looking down on the Earth, realizing that your actions as humans actually affect the lives of everybody else all around the planet when we think about how our oceans and how our atmosphere is all connected on this one planet Earth. So the actions that we make really do resonate and have an effect and an impact on everybody all around the globe. And you need to consider that in terms of living responsibly and being good stewards from our planet. We have to do the same thing as astronauts as we begin to explore other planetary bodies, and we'll have to continue to be good environmental stewards in those bodies as well. As I was on the space station, you know, when I launched to go to space, nobody had ever heard the word coronavirus or COVID-19 in the terms that we're hearing it today. And we watched the situation, this global pandemic, which has affected everybody on the planet. We watched that situation unfold from the space station. And that was a very strange feeling, because as I looked down on this planet, as I was saying, just as I realized all of us are in this together, there are 7.5 billion humans on the planet, and everybody was affected by this disease in some way, whether they were actually sick themselves or knew somebody who was ill, or if it was just affecting their routine because of all of the social distancing and quarantines and all of the measures that the entire planet had to put into effect. We were watching that from the space station, and there were only 3 of us on board. And we were the only 3 humans of the entire human species that were at the time not affected by this disease. It was a very strange thing for us to realize, and it made the whole situation quite surreal. But that's another reminder in this situation. We are all in this together. The entire planet is feeling this right now. And in a third way, I'm sure you've seen in the news some of this civil unrest that's really been the civil unrest that's been taking shape in this country, and has really caused a lot of Americans to take a step back and to think about our role in our society and how we can make it better to make sure that everybody, that all people, no matter what they look like and who they are represented equally. And that's something that's incredibly important and should be one of these founding principles for all of us as humans. And it's one more way of realizing when you're in space and you're looking down on our planet, it's so much easier for us to see that we are truly all in this together. And so I think that's a very important thing for all of us to remember going forward. And with that, Ron, we can start the video.
Jessica, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
All
okay.
Right, so hold on. We'll start right from the beginning. All right.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can still hear me as well. And this is a video that's put together of the highlights of the mission. You just saw the rollout of the Soyuz spacecraft that I launched in. And this is my crew on the right. Split views. This is the Soyuz spacecraft. So we launched with the Russian space program on a Russian spacecraft to go to the space station. We launched from Baikonur, and that is actually our spacecraft now in orbit, and you can see the different stages of the rocket separating. This is a picture that my crewmate Christina Cook took. That was actually a picture of my Soyuz rocket approaching the space station, taken from her view on the International Space Station. So pretty amazing photograph. And this is how the International Space Station looked to us as we were beginning to dock and to start our mission on board. Here we are. Here's Drew coming on board. He launched in July, so he got there about 2 months before I did. And then here I come in September of last year. And this was, as you can see by the look on my face, it was even more incredible to be there than I had ever imagined. And that was made even more special by the fact that I got to share that experience with several of my classmates that were selected as astronauts at the same time, and an international crew, Russian cosmonauts. Also on my flight was the very first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates. So again, this kind of international cooperation that is such an important part of everything that we do on board the space station. One of the things that we do, just daily living and life aboard the station, that's what's being highlighted here. Sometimes it's fun to just bounce around and float around and take advantage of living in microgravity. I actually have quite an affinity for food. People call me a foodie, and so the space food is very good these days, even all the freeze-dried things that you might read about. We actually have a lab that develops incredible food now. But I was making, in that last video scene, I was making a charcuterie board for a special treat for us. Exercise is a very important part of everything that we do on the International Space Station. This is how we lift weights. We need to exercise every day to make sure that we can maintain our bone health and our muscle mass, because without the force of gravity that we're feeling here, even when you're just sitting here not exercising, if we don't have that, we will actually start losing bone density and muscle mass immediately. Weightlifting equipment, we had a bicycle ergometer and a treadmill. And you want to just pause it there for a second so we can catch up a little bit with some of the narration, Ron. So that was the end. If you saw the exercise portions, we had those 3 main pieces of equipment. So just like on Earth, it's incredibly important for us to be exercising, even more important in space, as I was saying, because, you know, even if I'm sitting here in this chair today, when I am on Earth, I constantly am feeling these forces of gravity, this force of 1G, as we say. It's always acting down on my body. So even if I'm not exercising, my postural muscles are reacting against that. My bones are still being loaded by this gravity, and they're keeping my bones and muscles healthy and alive. And so in microgravity, your bones will actually start leaching calcium when you get to space because they don't have that loading anymore. So they think that they don't need it. So this is why it's such an important thing for us to exercise regularly on the space station and counteract it. And we have this incredible equipment that you just saw in the video, the weightlifting machine, the bicycle, and then also the treadmill to keep us healthy. Then you started seeing some images there of different holidays, and we had some Halloween costumes where I was a space pirate in that first one because our other costumes hadn't quite made it all the way up. And then we, as a crew, dressed to commemorate the Apollo 12 mission. That was an anniversary during our mission, and so that's why we had the sort of 1960s clothes going on that day as a tribute to the flight control teams and the astronauts from that era. We actually had several holidays on board, people's birthdays. We try to do things that are special to commemorate and just really to act like normal humans, because we're up there as astronauts and we're doing very important jobs, but we also have to remember, for a psychological component of being up there for months and months and months, it's important to have some normalcy to your life as well. So we celebrate birthdays. You saw, I think, a picture earlier. I didn't have that one in this presentation, but I did see it on one of the earlier screens of the Hanukkah socks, the menorah socks that I brought to the space station so that I could celebrate Hanukkah in some way. And then this was a Christmas celebration with the rest of the crew here. And you can go ahead and pick back up there, Ron. You can start playing. So one of the things we do, eating together as a group, you know, that just having that kind of a family experience together is really important for us too, to make time for each other. So now we're getting into some of the different scientific experiments that we do. I'm doing some maintenance there on a rack to install a new experimental module. And here you're seeing a combustion experiment. So we are up there on the space station doing all types of science. Anything from physiology and medicine to combustion science, protein crystal growth. And that experiment that you just saw there was a combustion experiment, because without gravity, even flames burn differently in space. This was an example of Drew Morgan and I. And we can pause it again, Ron. So what was happening in that last scene is Drew Morgan and I were loading a small satellite. So there's an airlock in the Japanese module in which you can load things and send them out into space. So we were launching small satellites, and now this is a life sciences glove box. And Ron, you want to pause it again one more time? So the satellites, that airlock in the Japanese experiment module allows us to push things outside, or if we wanted to put an experiment to expose it to space, to the radiation environment, the vacuum of space, on an external pallet that's on the International Space Station, we can do it that way. On the scene before this one, you saw lettuce growing, and that was a really cool part of the mission. We were growing this Mizuna lettuce, which is a really nice, strong, mustardy tasting lettuce, and we were growing it on the space station. This is really important for future exploration, since we're going to be able to be more sustainable in what we do and to have a sustainable food source when we, for example, go on even longer missions like going to Mars. That would be about 3 years, so we need to be able to grow food and show that we can do that. So that experiment was teaching us a lot about growing lettuce in space, and the best part of that experiment was we got to eat half of that lettuce. We don't have a lot of fresh vegetables and fruit up there, of course, so that was a real treat where we got to have a salad to eat half of that harvest, and then the other half was sent back to be analyzed. You also now are seeing, you saw some of the experiments that we were doing in the life sciences glove box. Those were some experiments with different cells. There was an experiment with bone cells, trying to understand more about the mechanism of what happens to our bones in space. And then there was one called engineered heart tissue, which was this really cool experiment, which essentially had these tissue engineered mini heart muscles. And so we could look at the tissue level and try to understand what's happening to our hearts, to our cardiovascular systems, and how that's affected by microgravity. This right here is an image of my crewmate Drew Morgan and myself, and we're doing another experiment called fluid shifts. And this experiment is really comprehensive, looking at all these different aspects of physiology to better understand what's happening to this upward body shift, fluid shift that we have in space. You know, when you're here on Earth, gravity is pulling your blood and your body fluids down to the ground just with this normal gravity gradient. So when you get to space, of course, that gradient is lifted and everything kind of lifts up. And you see that in astronauts, especially in the first few days, their faces look a little bit puffier and rounder, and everything is kind of more up here since it's not being pulled down by gravity. So we're measuring some of the different aspects of this fluid shift with an ultrasound. In this case, we're ultrasounding Drew's eye here. And there actually have been some significant cases where there are some changes to the anatomy and the morphology of the eye, and in some cases some vision changes induced just by going to space in astronauts. And so we're trying to understand this to make sure that we can continue to bring astronauts back to Earth safely at the end of their missions. And of course, you know, when we're going further and going to Mars, to get there, we need to make sure that we are delivering astronauts safely and that are safe and healthy to their destination. So you can go ahead and pick up the video again. So this is more of that study where we are ultrasounding and looking at different parts of the body. This you can see is one of the freezers that we have on board. So if we need to, just like a -80 freezer in a lab where you need to really deep freeze a scientific sample, like a blood sample or something like that, we have that capability on the space station. And of course, spacewalks are one of the most exciting parts of our mission. And you saw Drew in there getting suits ready. And here we're doing this training exercise to get ready for some very important spacewalks where Luca Parmitano and Drew Morgan did a spacewalk to repair the alpha magnetic spectrometer. So that is an instrument on the outside of the space station, which was actually never supposed to be serviced by us in spacesuits, but there was a problem with it, and there was a pump that was failing in the thermal control system. So in order to save this really important and remarkable piece of scientific equipment, which is collecting all of this high energy radiation from the cosmos and answering questions related to the origins of our universe. So really important stuff. And Drew and Luca, we did through this series of spacewalks, we were able to repair that. You saw a picture of me on the inside of the space station. I was flying the arm as Luca is here. Sometimes we have astronauts on the outside of the space station when moving them around on the arm. And we can pause here for a minute, Ron. So this is a picture. Now you're seeing footage from my spacewalks. I was incredibly fortunate, and I got to go out of the hatch 3 times during my mission. And this is really one of the highlights for me. Doing a spacewalk was always the thing that I had dreamed about. And other than just looking back at the Earth through the window, now you're out looking back at the Earth in your own little mini spacecraft. And the only thing that's separating that vacuum of space is your thin visor in front of you. So that's an incredibly interesting feeling and something really profound. That was one of my favorite aspects of the mission. You may have heard that this was also an historic event for us, because this was actually the first time that 2 women had been doing a spacewalk at the same time. So Christina Cook, my crewmate, and my classmate, we have both became astronauts at the same time. The 2 of us had the privilege of conducting that first all-female spacewalk. And I say privilege because it really wasn't something that, it's to us, it's not really an individual achievement to us. We just happened to be the people that were doing the spacewalk that day, but really it's a privilege that we were fortunate enough to represent the generations of women and the generations of minorities and people that had been pushing the boundaries for decades before us and getting us to this point where, to us, it wasn't really a big deal that we were 2 women out there doing this together, because when we started as astronauts, 50% of our class was female, 50% of our class was male. We all had the same training and we were held to the same standards. So it didn't really make a difference if we were women or men, we could all do the same job. But that's not to be said that it wasn't also an incredibly historic moment, because it represented all of the work that the generations of women had done before us. Because it is true that we all haven't always had a seat at the table and been equally represented. So this does really show the progress that all of those generations made. And for us, it was just an honor to be representing all of the work that had come before this. So we did 3 spacewalks, and Ron, you can go ahead and start the video again. We did 3 spacewalks to basically upgrade a battery channel. These are the picture of the batteries here, and we were replacing those batteries with newer, higher capacity batteries, lithium ion batteries, in order to have more power and a more enhanced power reserve system on the International Space Station. So Christina and I did 3 spacewalks together, and there you can see the 2 of us at the end of a spacewalk. It really is an incredible feeling. So how do we get supplies to the space station? We have a lot of requirements up there in terms of food and our clothing and everything for us, but most importantly, the experimental equipment and all the hardware that keeps the space station running. So you can see me here flying that robotic arm. So I'm on the controls, I'm moving that robotic arm to grab that visiting vehicle and to pull it in and to what we call berth it to the space station, so that then we can unload all of the cargo and get everything we need. So that was, those images showed us doing that. We're unloading cargo, we even get some things like fresh fruits and vegetables sometimes on those cargo vehicles, so pretty exciting. And then at the end of the mission, we release the vehicle with that robotic arm, and it either goes back down to the Earth in the case of the SpaceX vehicle, which returns cargo to Earth, or in other cases, it becomes a trash vehicle. We fill it up with our trash and it burns up in the atmosphere. Another really important thing that we do on the International Space Station is our Earth observations. There's a picture of me in the cupola, and I think I spent a lot of time in the early part of this presentation showing you how important those views were to me, and hoping to share some of those views with all of you. And so this imagery just shows Drew and I, and some of our other crewmates I think will appear here, and the views that we had, some of the photography that we took. And you'll probably recognize some of the time-lapse sequences as well. Israel makes several appearances, so make sure you keep your eyes out to recognize your home from all these footages, from this footage as well. You can see a little bit of the atmosphere here if you look up and you see that thin blue boundary that we just flew over Israel in that image. And sometimes with the light, you see some extraordinary shadows cast on the horizon. I loved looking at the night photography, and a little bit earlier on here, you saw some lightning. That was so cool to look down on. Here's Israel once again, and seeing all of those city lights and the aurora. These are the northern and the southern lights, which we can see both of which from the International Space Station. And to see that, I don't know if you've ever seen the northern lights or the southern lights in your lifetimes, but if you ever have the chance, you have to be at a pretty high latitude to see those. From the space station, the whole sky is glowing this extraordinary green, and it looks really otherworldly. Unfortunately, all of the things that we do, though, like everything in life, eventually comes to an end. And so I had been up there on the space station for about 7 months, and now we're getting ready to come home. And this was all happening just in this past April. We're getting into our Soyuz spacecraft, as you can see here, closing the hatch and getting ready to come back to Earth. So I'm over there on that left side. In the middle is our commander, Oleg Skripochka, Russian cosmonaut, and that was Drew Morgan, my colleague in the right seat. As I mentioned, I launched with Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri, the first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates. He was only up there for about 8 days, so although I launched with him, he went back with a different crew, and Drew came back with us. There we are landing in Kazakhstan. And that's how the Soyuz lands, on land. And then you can see us out here. We're making our first phone calls home. And within about 24 hours, we came back on the NASA aircraft and came back here to Houston to see our friends and families. And this is where we've been ever since. We landed on April 17th, so coming up on 2 months next week. And I think that wraps up the video. So I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions, because I think that that's probably the most important part of this, is to hear what some of you have to say and to answer some of your burning questions. I hope you got to feel a little bit more what it's like to be on the International Space Station and in that video. And I would be very happy to take your questions and comments at this time. Thank you so much for this opportunity of sharing a little bit of my mission with you, and I hope to continue to do that in the future.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for this inspiring talk. So we picked some questions, and I think I'll ask you 3 questions at a time, and you'll pick them up, and it will be easier. So the first question comes from Evan Yehuda, and there's a girl there that asks, what's the most beautiful thing that you saw in space? Another question from Maor Itzchakov from Harel School in Hulon. He asked, how does the astronaut schedule looks like in the ISS?
Okay, so the first one, the most beautiful thing, I don't know that I can pick just one. I think maybe I'll have to do this because people ask this a lot, but it's so difficult to pick one. Some of the most beautiful things you saw a little bit in that video, the aurora, are so extraordinary to see. And I was starting to say, I don't think I even finished, how cool the Earth and the planet looks at night. You see all of these lights from all of the cities, but then when the moon is bright and when the moon is in the right position, you can see a lot of moon glow on the planet, even when it's dark. So you can see all of the city lights like it's like at night, but you can also still see all of the continents and the shapes of all the geographical features because there's so much moonlight being directed back onto the planet. And that makes it even more beautiful. You can see the moon glint off the water, off the oceans and the rivers, and you can see the shapes of the continents, and you can still see all those city lights. I loved that. I loved looking at the aurora. Looking down at things like glaciers flying over the Patagonia ice fields, unbelievably beautiful. I mentioned the sands and the textures. I never had such appreciation for how much diversity of color and texture there was in all the different sand dunes around the Middle East, close to where you live, also in all of Africa. You saw some of those colors in that first time-lapse photo that I showed you. So many different things. I'll have to try to refine it a little bit more to pick just one. And the second question about our schedule, that's a good question. So first of all, on the International Space Station, we operate on Greenwich Mean Time, so London time, not too far off from your time zone. But on London time, that's our daily schedule. So we have control centers here in Houston, but we also have control centers in Moscow. So we had to pick kind of a common time. And some for other operations that we do, especially science, we have control centers in Europe as well, and in Japan. So we're blending all of these time zones together. When we wake up in the morning, we check our schedule. We have a software on the computer that shows us our schedule for the day, and it has a different band for each one of the crew members. So you look at your band and you see the first thing we do and start off the day is with a planning conference. So we talk to the ground teams to see if there's any important information that we need to relay back and forth to each other before we get started. And then we start throughout our day. And if you go to the timeline on the computer and you pick one of the activities, they'll have all the information that you need for that activity. It will have a procedure and any other information for where the things are located that you need to go find in order to perform the activity. And that activity can be anything ranging from a scientific experiment. You saw some examples of some of the science that we do in that video. It might be going for a spacewalk that day. And of course, we've planned ahead if it's going to be a spacewalk because that's an especially long day and we have a lot of prep to do for that. Another day, it might be capturing one of those visiting vehicles. It might just be doing space station maintenance, since of course when we're up there on the space station, if we have to change a light bulb or fix the toilet, we can't call a plumber or an electrician. We have to be able to do all those things ourselves. And that's one of my favorite parts of the job, is that we're not just doing one thing. I'm a scientist by training, but in addition to doing science, I also have to change the light bulbs, go for a spacewalk, and fix the toilet. So one day you might just be doing maintenance on the toilet or maintenance on another system on the space station. So each day is quite different, and we just go about our schedule based on what's planned for us today. We don't actually plan our days, but we have an extraordinary ground team that has put a lot of thought into our schedule to make sure we accomplish all the things we need to and put the right priorities on it. So we basically, I guess the short answer of what we do and how our schedule works is we do what the ground tells us.
That's a good one. Okay, so I'm picking few questions and I'll try to merge them. First question is, when did you decided to become an astronaut? The second question, well, it's a big one, but I think from all over the country, children asked it, is what does it take to be an astronaut? What are the main characters and the things that you need to go through training? And the third one will be what inspired you the most before you went into space?
Okay, so I started saying I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 5 years old. I don't actually remember that, but my mom tells me that's when I started saying that. And a lot of kids say that. And I remember my first distinct memory was when I was in the first grade and we were asked to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I drew a picture of an astronaut standing on the surface of the moon. Now I've been to space, but I haven't quite gone to the moon yet. So hopefully I'll get to do that as well. But so far, the dream has been achieved. The second question, what it takes to be an astronaut. So astronauts share one thing in common, and that is that we all have a degree in a STEM field. So science, technology, engineering, math. I know that these are all the foundations that are also enforced in the Ramon Foundation and part of all of your education. So really important disciplines. If these are the fields that you're interested in, then you're maybe naturally inclined to be an astronaut. And so we all have a bachelor's degree in one of these fields. And now there's actually one of the more recent requirements for American astronauts is to have a master's degree or above in one of these fields as well. So the interesting thing about our office as astronauts now is that it's incredibly diverse. And that is something that has really evolved over time. If you know what the astronauts looked like, the original astronauts in the original Mercury astronauts, they were all test pilots in the military. So they were all men, they all were test pilots in the military. But now we have very diverse office. We still have military test pilots because they have very strong backgrounds that are applied to the field of being an astronaut, but we also have doctors, so we have physicians, we have scientists like me, we have different types of scientists, physicists, chemists, we have other engineers, and so I think that that is a much stronger team, because if you think about it, if you have a group of 6 people on the space station and everybody has exactly the same background and thinks the same experience and thinks the same way, if you have to solve a problem, then you're probably not going to have a very creative solution, because everybody's going to be approaching that problem from the same viewpoint. But if you take a team and make it up out of a very diverse crew and people with very different experiences and backgrounds, then you can solve a problem, I think, in a much more creative way. And I think it's a lot more fun for the crew as well when you have a really diverse crew that's making up a team. And you know, there are studies on the ground as well in numerous environments that show when you have a diverse crew of people solving a problem, people are happier, people are more productive, companies are more successful. And so that's a really encouraging thing, I think, to see that all different kinds of people can become astronauts. Of course, to be an American astronaut, you have to be an American citizen, but we have partner agencies all around the world. The International Space Station partners include the European Space Agency, the Canadian Space Agency, and the Japanese Space Agency. Other countries have space programs as well. For example, in China, they have launched humans as well. India has a space program that's becoming bigger and bigger. We launched the first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, as I mentioned, with me on my mission. We have other types of involvement for partner astronauts like Ilan Ramon's flight. So you never know. I think we're seeing more and more countries giving opportunities and experiences. And also now that space tourism is becoming more, there's more emphasis put on it. We have lots of different companies that are developing different ways, maybe not to get all the way to the space station, but even to do suborbital flights, things like Virgin Galactic. So the positive sign is that space is becoming much more accessible for all humans.
Sorry, we have a question from Yotam from a place called Katsir. What was your biggest challenge during your route to become an astronaut?
Yeah, that's another one of the really important messages that I like to get across, and even a part of a lot of my presentations, a standard part of that, is to remind everybody that you have to be willing to take risks. If you want to do something truly great, then you need to remember that you have to be able to take a risk to get that. And if you don't fail along the way, you might not be trying hard enough. Failure is part of everything that we do, and that is when we learn our strongest life lessons, is when we fail along the way. I truly believe that without being willing to take a risk, then you're not going to get the reward that's truly worth it in the end. So given that, it's true for me and for all the other people, all the other astronauts I know, we have all had to take risks. We've all been in situations that challenged us and made us feel uncomfortable, but we pushed ourselves, we took that risk, and we even failed along the way to learn from it. For me, probably one of the biggest things that had a big impact on me was that I actually applied before I was selected. I applied a couple times, and the most recent time, so I was selected to be an astronaut in 2013. 2009 was the previous selection, and I applied that year as well, and I made it all the way to the final round, which is only about 40 to 50 people, and everything went really well in the interview process, and I knew that I had given it my best shot. But in the end, they only selected 9 astronauts that year, and I wasn't one of them. So that was a pretty big setback. You know, I'd made it so far and gotten so close, and then it didn't happen. And I got that call that told me I wasn't selected, and that, of course, it's heartbreaking when you have your entire life's work based on something. And I knew that there was a very small chance of it coming true, but when you start getting closer and closer, you know, it becomes quite disappointing when you don't achieve it. So 4 years later, I had the opportunity to apply again, and I thought, wow, that was a lot of hard work to apply mentally and physically. It was a lot that you had to go through psychologically, going through that whole process, which occurs over quite a long time. And I thought, maybe it's not worth putting myself through that again, because it's just going to be the same result. It's a numbers game. I know that it's such a small chance of anybody becoming an astronaut. It doesn't matter how good you are. I went through it all before, and I wasn't selected. So, you know, maybe it's just not in the cards for me. Maybe I don't need to put myself through this whole thing, and I won't apply. And if I started thinking that way, finally I realized, well, if I don't apply, then I know I won't get selected. If I don't take the risk and be willing to take that risk again and to have that risk of failing again, then I know it'll never come true. So I did apply again, and I went through it, and I came down here for the interview, and it went well again. And I thought, oh, well, it's good to see everybody again. It's going to be the same results. That's just the way it's going to work out. And in the end, this time it was, of course, incredibly different, and I ended up being part of that next class. So I think that's one of my biggest challenges, was realizing that I needed to put myself out there again and to keep trying. And if you do sometimes, then it's totally worth it in the end.
That's inspiring. The entire talk and the question is so inspiring. The last question, Tal, you want to ask the last questions? Put on the... תפתח למסך.
Can you hear me? Can you see me? All right.
Yes.
So first of all, thank you so much for this amazing speech. It was amazing to see your photography and to see the videos. It was so moving. I know we all enjoyed it here. One last question for me. After all these experiences, what is your dream now? Like, what is the one thing you want to do now after all this?
Yeah, it's a good question. What is left after I accomplish this dream? And I don't know right now. I think, so right now I'm focused on the portion of our post-flight journey, so where we are debriefing all of the communities here at NASA, and so that we can continue to move forward and help and improve for future missions. And then outreach and talks like this one are a very big part of everything that we're doing right now. As I mentioned, one of my biggest missions is to share this mission, to share this with everybody else and make sure that more people can help and share in this experience. But I think my biggest dream now would be to make that the first grade picture come true and to go to the moon. And right now NASA is planning the Artemis missions, and we are making good progress toward that. And we will be, as I'm sure you've heard the announcement proclaimed, we'll be launching the first woman and the next man to go back to the surface of the moon and eventually to go on to Mars. So I really hope that I can play a role in those missions. That would be that would really be a dream come true, to be standing on the surface of the moon. And I'm not in control of that. I don't know, of course, if that will happen, but there is a good chance that I'll be able to play a role in that mission in some way, whether I'm supporting other crew members that are going, supporting from the ground, or part of the mission myself. So I think that's part of the dream for now. And just so everybody knows, I am going to continue sharing. I will continue to share my photography. So I have thousands of pictures that I still haven't even had time to go through yet. So I'm trying to regularly share my photos and a weekly time lapse on my social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter. If you don't know them already, it's @astro_Jessica. And there are a lot of other NASA accounts too that are sharing lots of imagery and recounting all of the missions right now. We have a crew up there right now. We just had the successful launch of SpaceX, which was a very big deal for us as Americans. We're launching from the US again. And the positive side is that international partnership and collaboration will continue. I loved my experiences in Russia, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. And we will be continuing to partner with the Russian Space Agency going forward. But it's also an extremely positive sign that we can launch from the US again, because this means on the planet Earth, we have yet another vehicle capable of carrying humans to space. So a great thing for all humans, and that progress is still going on.
That sounds amazing. I want to wish you a very good luck with all your journeys up ahead. And my wish, my dream, is to have you one day in Israel and to actually meet you again in person and have a conversation. And thank you so much for everything you've done for Israel and for us, for Keren Ramon, for our foundation that my mom she had a dream also, and she made that dream come true. And thank you so much for taking a part in that dream.
Okay, Tada Rabba. Thank you very much, Tal. Thank you to everybody in the Ramon Foundation in Israel. I hope to see you all in January.
Bye bye.
תודה רבה, thank you so much לג'סיקה, לשותפים שלנו, בנאסא, לשותפים של סוכנות החלל הישראלית במשרד החינוך, המון תודה לחברים ב-N12 ולצוות המדהים של מייקרוסופט ומייקרוסופט טימס שאפשרו את הדבר הזה, את השידור הזה. אספו כאן והגענו לפחות או יותר 60,000 צפיות, שזה דבר מאוד מרשים. אנחנו נעלה בהמשך את ההרצאה הזאת ב-HD, עם תרגום, בלי תרגום למדיות החברתיות, אז תודה רבה לכולכם. Thank you very much just to our partners at NASA and to the Israeli Space Agency and to all of you. Take care and hopefully we'll see you sometime here in Israel. Thank you very much.